Evening, everybody. Thank you for your patience and your grace as we get started tonight. Every time we do something with technology, we always have some fun adventures. But first, welcome to those of you who are here in the room. Welcome to those of you who are watching our live stream, and those of you who are watching this later here at Grace Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Carolyn Hetrick, together with my colleague, Pastor Scott Schul. We welcome you to our third week in our series, Ecology of Grace. Just a note about hospitality first for those of you here in the room. If you need to use a restroom or find water, you go back out the doors, make a left, go through the next door, and everything that you need is there if at any time you need to step away. For those of you who are watching this on the live stream, or those of you here who say, I want to go back and see more about what I heard tonight, this will be on our YouTube channel tomorrow, Grace Lutheran State College, PA. You can see our entire series, including tonight's episode, with Dr. Casey Sclar, who has had incredible patience as we tried to get our tech lined up tonight. Casey is the H.O. Smith Endowed Director, sounds very, very important, of the Arboretum at Penn State, one of my very favorite places here in Happy Valley to go. And it's looking really lovely right now. So if you haven't been out lately, please do if you're in the area. And for those of you who don't know this is something that I hadn't thought about until I went over and had a walk around with Casey and a chat with him and with Sandy Hall. The entire Penn State campus is actually an arboretum. So if you wonder why there's so many different kinds of trees and you're not a Penn State alum, that's why. So it's an arboretum within an arboretum, which is a lovely, lovely thing as we continue talking about ecology, the study of relationships between organisms and their environment and vital connections. We've been talking these last few weeks about the theological, the faith side of those connections. But what we see in the created world gives us another way of seeing how these creations all relate together, how the connections are all supporting each other. And there is really almost no better place to see that than the Arboretum. So I'm going to give you just a little bit about Casey, and then we're going to call him up to get started. Not only is he currently there as the director, he's been there since August of 2022, and he has experience in horticulture across 3 decades, which is impressive. And he has been the executive director of the American Public Gardens Association, which he did for over a decade, which served more than 600 public gardens. Remind me to talk to you later about the water lily way off, which I got sucked into this year. And so he, in that role, was serving gardens in the United States, Canada, Mexico, and more than 20 other countries, which is really amazing. And he's also been involved with work at Longwood Gardens and many other things, but he's the affiliate professor for the Department of Entomology, which is bugs, insects, right? Not bugs. That's like dirt versus soil, right? At the College of Agricultural Sciences. And I've said all that I ought to say because you've got much more fascinating things to say. Casey, we're delighted that you're with us tonight.
Okay, can y'all hear me all right? So I just also want to say what an absolutely huge honor it is to be here, to be your guide on a journey today on what we're going to talk about together, because it's just a wonderful thing, and being with you all at dinner tonight and experiencing your grace and your welcoming nature was just really overwhelming and wonderful. So thank you so much for being here. Tonight we're going to talk about the Arboretum at Penn State, and through the eyes of grace and through the eyes of ecology. And I am also an etymologist as well as an entomologist. So I like to study words, and I like to study word choices. And so we'll talk a little bit about what it means to be a microcosm and a microcosm of grace, and what grace really means, and the many different meanings of grace, because depending on who you ask and how you ask. And I also, so I just want you to know that that's part of our journey tonight. Another part of our journey tonight is, to acknowledge that the land that we occupy every day is ours, and when we say ours, it really is ours. And the original tenants of the land and the original creators of the land, if you will, we have multiple different viewpoints on who, where, how, what that is, but the occupants and the original occupants of this land are the indigenous folks, and they still occupy these lands and are still here. And it's good for us to know how we did that and how we are. And the WCC actually acknowledges this, so it's something where I struggled personally and said, do I want to present this to you tonight? Do I not? And the WCC acknowledges indigenous cultures, and we'll talk a little bit more why later. But it's good for us to know that there were nations, that Penn State, being as big as it has been, has occupied that and is in the process of thinking about what that means. And I typically talk a lot about the land-grant mission when I'm doing these types of talks, and I've steered a little bit away from that tonight. So just know that as we talk about different things, you know, we're all in service, and we're all in service to everyone and everything, I guess is the best way to put that as we talk about it. So thank you, Reverend Hetrick, Pastor Hetrick, for introducing me, and so some of y'all are thinking, okay, who is this guy and why is he here? Which reminds me of an old political debate from many years ago. Some of you will catch that joke. Who am I? Why am I here? But I do occupy several different roles and several different things. The University Tree Commission being one, a member for the Center of Pollinator Research. We also do some greater advocacy work in Harrisburg on the importance of all these different spaces of public gardens through PA Gardens. And then I am the vice president of a society that takes care of things with no legs and things with more than 4 legs, the Xerces Society. And an advisory council member. But I'm also a father. I'm also someone who is the parent of pets, dogs and cats, and many other things. And so I live to make the world a better place for people and for plants and for trees. And so if you want to know that. But the other thing to know is that I really have a perfect wedding with Penn State. We were talking about it a little bit. I started back with cooperative extension when I first moved into the Commonwealth, now almost 30 years ago, with folks who to this day are leaders, guides for me. And so I was an adjunct faculty back 25 plus years ago. And then there's, you know, like any perfect wedding, that's the something old. And then there's the something new, which is being a part of Penn State Outreach, which is a wonderful place that has Commonwealth commitments to inspire discovery, prepare students for future workforce success, and serve Pennsylvania. And so there's a great calling there for me personally. And then there's something borrowed in the wedding, so everything from membership databases and SQL to organizational composting to working with tribal communities and advocacy and all these different weird random skills that come out, even pumpkin harvester. And they don't let me around forklifts anymore, but I have a forklift certification. So you just never know. And then there's something blue and white, because I believe in this place, I believe in this town, and I believe in this very special place. So today's journey is to give you a little bit of a history of the eyes of the Arboretum very quickly, in the eyes of grace and in the eyes of things. And then we'll talk about the Arboretum as it exists today as a microcosm. And then we're going to get into a little bit in terms of what our path ahead is as a metaphor for things. And then finally, I'll conclude, like all doctors, I'm going to give you some prescription recommendations. The Arboretum at Penn State is an amazingly special place. It holds different meaning for many different individuals and for many different things. It's a special place on earth. It's a special place on earth. What do I mean? You know, this is the famous blue marble, and each of us see different things and see different types of creation when you look at this and you look at our world, and we seem so small here in central Pennsylvania. But it's an amazing place on earth. It's an amazing place on earth just when we think about water, because 70% of our planet is based on water, right? And yet, right here in the mid-Atlantic, we have this virtual cutoff that we can see, where all this water that graces our lives is flowing past us, and just on the other side of those mountains, it's going to a whole different place. It's having a whole different experience. What do I really mean when I say that? You know, that means that you could have an entirely different experience from which the ridge and valley of Pennsylvania is formed here, and live out that experience for what that means. And we know this, we know how amazing it is because we look at the microplates of Laurentian block and their ages that we scientists have tried to quantify. And we know that the soil that we're standing on now, the bedrock that we dig into now on this side, is in many cases less than, it's 1/2 as old as everything that's on that side. And it crushed up and it forced itself together and it came together. And we get to be the blessing of that and to see that. So now technology is going to cooperate with me, right? And when I say we get to see that, I know that because the watershed sculpture at the Arboretum told me that. That was kind of a joke. But then we actually really get to see it from the watershed sculpture. Literally the last mountain ridge that you can see is that cutoff between those two places where we can tell that. And that in itself is a grace and a gift to us. Sure, okay, yep. Yep, she's gonna pump me up a little bit, pump up the volume, as they say. Thank you, Allison. So being able to have that opportunity, to have that special place on earth that's been given to us, right? And is a grace and a gift to us, to be able to see that and live that out, and then to be able to explain that to all of our two-legged individuals who come through the site is an amazing thing. We also, so when we're looking at that furthest ridge, it also is a place where we see some amazing gifts of grace in this photograph. We see, obviously, those extended mountains. We see the slippery elm, which is a mystery. We don't exactly know when that tree was planted. We don't know who planted those trees. Back beyond that, we see the Hartley Woods, right? And in the Hartley Woods, we know that there are trees that are 300, 400 years old because we've gone through and looked at them. And there's some of the largest stand of heritage white oak that have been found in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Beyond there, there's our prairie and the Garehole Wildflower Trail and some extant species that need to be conserved. There are rare plants out there. There are chestnut plots out there that have stands of American chestnut research. So there's some amazing things that are there. But the Hartley Woods stand out as very significant to me because they speak to the occupied history of this land, the land that has been colonized, right? And so Thomas Hartley was given this land from William Penn. He signed up for a Penn deed that everybody else did. And he was an amazing guy. So while everybody else was buying up these mystery tracts of land and square little things, Thomas Hartley thought different. He purchased a tract of land that was completely odd-shaped, and one of its borders is what is today Park Avenue. So he knew there was something that he knew, and he also knew to conserve trees at a time when many people were chopping down those trees and were turning them into charcoal, which along the way we mined, and we turned into ore, and we put that together and made pig iron and sent it down, or it was manufactured into what fueled the Industrial Revolution. But for some reason, Thomas Hartley said, not my trees. And we don't exactly know why, I don't think, but it's an amazing story that somehow that's persisted to us as a gift, right? And we move on, and we all know, because it's been taught to us again and again, of folks who live here in this area about the Farmers College and how it was established. But as Reverend Hetrick mentioned, Penn State from its earliest origins was an arboretum. Evan Pugh, who planted many trees and was the first president of Penn State, was a botanist. The people who originated the movement of land-grant institutions, Senator Justin Morrill and Jonathan Baldwin Turner, these were horticulturalists. They wanted to do things. So in many ways, our legacy was there. And we knew that Penn State should be an arboretum, had to be an arboretum on campus. And so for many, many years, we said, Penn State is an arboretum. Why do we need an arboretum? And there was discussions that literally went over a century to have this. And the intersection of what is now Park Avenue and Bigler Road is there in the lower left. And so it was also a place where water moved through that site, detained through that site, and had many different uses. So there was stormwater moving through our site. And the Arboretum is still beautiful any time of year when we're looking from the Overlook Pavilion. And so the debate raged on, should we have an Arboretum? And then, lo and behold, in 1999, all those things sort of changed, and Sasaki and Associates came up with a master plan and said, no more football parking out there. That land, 370 acres, should be set aside as an Arboretum. And so our die was cast at that moment. We have that amazing notation of, that's back when there was very little there, when we parked there for football, and that was a surface parking lot. There was nothing there. And so somebody, in this case, my predecessor, Kim Steiner, came up with this amazing idea and said, we should have something that witnesses the growth of the Arboretum. And by that grace, there was a group of folks in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, who had a white oak tree and said, we have this amazing white oak to be able for you to dig and to bring it up. And we, in this case, Kim and Charlie Hosler, named it the Hosler Oak. And Charlie Hosler forms a great connection to climate and weather for somebody like Allison, because Charlie was the first weatherman, possibly the first weatherman ever. And so he was on Penn State weather back in the 40s and 50s, even when television was just coming around. And he came from the military industry, and he just set it out there. And the farmers used to say, you can harvest hay with Hosler. That's how much that they trusted him, and they trusted that it would be a success. So he lent his name to this amazing Hosler oak, and you can still see the Hosler oak today. And as Kathy Kennedy was saying to me today, there were some OG people, some original people that got on with Kim and this dream, and everybody said, this isn't ever going to work, it's never going to work, and for a long time tried to raise money for the Arboretum, missed on a gift that was about $1.5 million at one point, and the story goes that Kim went to then President Spanier and he said, Kim, I don't know if this is going to work. And so at that point in time, there was a moment, right? And there was a moment of uncertainty, and we'll talk about moments of uncertainty. And that was apparently on a Friday, and I think the story goes that on a Thursday after that, there was a gentleman, and his name was Skip Smith. And Skip had been keeping the 3-ring binder of all the clippings about the Arboretum, and he walked in, and a young Dave Lieb was their president in the development office at that time. And he literally walked in on a Thursday with the 3-ring binder and said, here is a founding gift. Here's, in this case, $10 million for you to start an Arboretum. $25 to women's rugby. So if there's true proof that there is grace and there is generosity and there is spirit everywhere, it's in that gift. And Skip, who I have had very little interaction with, unfortunately, but very much so with his family, emulates everything about grace in that sense for why he gave that gift and what he wanted to see. And there's a beautiful quote that his son Dave recounted to me that the sentiments that were around what his father echoed, which is a place where our regional plant kingdom can be explored by the young, whose curiosity can be inspired, by the old, who can now take the time to admire what they may all too often have missed, and for everyone in between who may just love a place to enjoy the peace and serenity that nature can provide if we only give it the chance. And in particular, the power of plants, and in particular, the power of trees. The Smith family really loved and honored and do honor trees and our natural world. And so this is like a value for us. This is an amazing value that we try as people who occupy that land now and are stewards of now to emulate in everything that we do. There's a beautiful shot that you can see here where we found our pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. The business building sprung up right about that time, amazingly. And the strolling garden was created, and we were off and going with the man-made landscape of the Arboretum, which today still exists, and one of the core components of that is the strolling garden, which at any time of year was thoughtfully created, not so that you as an individual can walk around, because you can, but we made all the pathways deliberately twice as wide so that everyone could walk side by side together and have conversations together and use it as a place of togetherness. And we find joy and we find beauty and we find grace in that ability to be together, to appreciate nature. And many different conversations have taken place. Proposals have taken place. Weddings take place there. All sorts of things take place at the Arboretum and at the strolling garden at any time of year. We're open 365 days a year, no fee, as long as the weather's clear and it's safe. We're open for enjoyment. So that was 2010. In 2012, I think everybody knows the history, if you've been in Happy Valley for a long time, of what happened to Penn State. I'm not going to talk about that. What I'm going to talk about is that coming out of that, there was an act to establish a children's garden. And Patrick Williams, who's here today, who's an amazing fundraiser and partner in everything that I do, helped raise all these funds for the Childhood Gates Children's Garden, which is at one stroke Penn State, but at another stroke, a true gift to the entire community and to the world in terms of what it does, because it also exemplifies the ridge and valley and the importance of the ridge and the valley and the formation. And so it's a place that's very much Center County, it's very much Happy Valley, and at the same time, it's very Penn State because it's the Childhood's Gate. It talks about our alma mater in a really positive way. And so when you go in and you discover the children's garden, there's a cave in the background, and there's a buffalo for everybody to go and see, and there's vegetables, and there's kaleidoscopes, and there's Parker the caterpillar, and there's so much in there. There's sights, there's sounds. None of it deliberately pushed at you. It's there for you to explore and for you to become one with. And that's an amazing thing that the Arboretum is doing every single day. And I can sit here and rattle off facts and figures of how many school groups we have and how many kids come through every day and how many of them are on guided tours. But it's also those families that come in just for that moment of respite. And I can't tell you countless numbers of families who do that with us and are there. But it's also the people who occupy it for learning. So that learning takes place along an amazing continuum. So that gift of grace gives back to us an increased knowledge. And whether it's the knowledge of somebody like Logan, who now is gainfully employed with a master's in agriculture and as an engaging turf queen who's out on the eastern shore of Maryland and giving back every single day, to her home that goes through work-study opportunities, through experiential learning opportunities, through volunteerism, all the way through OLLI partner programs. So it's really, we like to say it's from pre-K to gray that we're doing this, and that we do it all with an open heart. Just a little bit about that volunteer program. We take volunteers all the time. We're always looking for volunteers, always happy to have you come. And as Reverend Hetrick was saying, there is a difference between dirt and soil. Dirt is what gets under your fingernails, but soil is what is so therapeutic to you. And so we have botanical science and gardening opportunities, but we also have opportunities for just being a guide or being someone who's a greeter or somebody who is working in some capacity with us. Even our burgeoning library we have a volunteer for, and we host students, and they love to learn about things from invasive weed removal all the way through volunteering for Pumpkin Festival. And then we also partner with LifeLink so that we're providing new and different pathways and opportunities for those from neurodivergent communities to really learn more about these different opportunities that they may or may not know exist. So it's both a coached opportunity and learning opportunity. Learning opportunity for Austin. So we perform professional acts of horticulture, and we're engaging interns that are paid for their work to come and learn. And come and learn how to do things safely, and come and learn that trade craft so that they have that grace and gift to be able to give back. So grace is a gift, and it's giving back every single day for what we do, and it's there for us to continue learning from. And a wonderful living laboratory is the pollinator and bird garden. So that followed in 2021, and that's an amazing intersection, particularly for somebody who's an entomologist. I mean, that's a pretty cool thing. But we're performing research. We're performing experiential learning opportunities for folks to learn about how to plant, what bees to attract. And it's not just a pollinator garden for monarch butterflies and honeybees. Yeah, they're there. But it's also for ground nesting bees. It's for squash bee that pollinates pumpkins, and for many, many different things more. Because the Arboretum is a living museum. So Pastor Scott and I were talking right before about Linnaeus. And so here is your Linnaean quick facts in your learning museum. So there are thousands of different plants that are there, 120 plant families that are present at our site. It's a hot spot for biodiversity in that sense. And when we talk about what is a taxa or what is an accession, those are museum terminology. So having the Palmer Museum of Art come to us is an important thing, but they have several curators who take care of their 10,000 objects. We have one curator who takes care of over 5,000 objects, and our objects don't just hang. Our objects pick up roots, they move, they're living, they die. We're constantly getting more, we're constantly losing a couple. And 1 out of every 6 plants is involved in research with really every college. So it's interesting how that intersection in itself is an opportunity. It's a gift. It's a gift that we get by just having an arboretum in a garden. The Palmer Museum of Art is also an amazing gift. It's a gift of partnership and a gift of opportunity for us, and bringing them on board. They're amazing partners, and we get to do things. And this is just this week's lineup, ladies and gentlemen. We have nature sketching so that you can become a better artist and sketch objects in nature. You can chill out with yoga. We have bird walks that are scheduled, and an amazing forest therapy walk with the founder of the Nature RX movement, Dr. Don Rakow, and that's all this week. But every single week, we're doing programming for a whole wide variety of folks and everything that we do. And then there's Pumpkin Fest. So, and I'm just going to check in on time because my timepiece decided to quit. Oh, there it is. We're doing good. Yep, we're doing great. So Pumpkin Fest is this wonderful gift that we have. And it's an amazing gift that we have where we give away 1,000 pumpkins to the community or more, and then they all come back and bring them back. But it's also a gift in terms of its overall impact on our community. So it unites town and gown. It injects about $1 million at least into our local economy, so it makes sense from that perspective. It's really ticking all the boxes for us. So here's a moment where we just pause and say, all that happens, and all that happens under a shadow. So the same picture that I showed you earlier is looked at in an entirely different light when we talk about man's impacts on our site that are constant and there. So we have situations where we have trucks, we have the wonderful porta-johns from Lot 11, we have 872 people who go down and tailgate in Lot 11, and so football, housing and food services, jet fuel, wastewater treatment plant, all over the aquifer that Penn State gets 85% of its drinking water from. So all that is happening in that view. And then that leads us to a different place, right? And it leads us to a little bit of a dark place. And this slide's black for a reason. When we talk about grace, it's easy to start talking about the opposite of grace. And I decided that rather than show you all these images of what disgrace looks like and what the opposite of grace looks like, I think that there's enough inside each and every one of us that when we look at that image and into the blackness, that we can find those images ourselves, because there's too much of it out there for us to look at today. So I look at that and I see certain things. I look at when maybe I didn't rise to the values that I needed to at a moment because I'm an imperfect human. But maybe there's other things that you see in there. And so it's easy in those moments to get down and say there's this constant threat of us, and we're under threat and under uncertainty. But But what grace is more. It's a simple joy. It can be that we learn in spite of all that, and that maybe we're just using the opportunity as a time when we graduate out of that phase. And the Arboretum's doing that service in a wide variety of ways. We know that there's many weddings that take place, and we have to adapt and understand that that's a great thing for us to offer. We have a 1,000% track record. Everybody who comes to the Arboretum gets married. And we have, as far as we know, they leave married, and that's great. But we also do events and festivals that are all set up to a clockwise cadence. This is where I want to just pause for a minute and talk about that lesson and that cadence that's learned. Because the last time I was in this building, we were honoring Dennis. And Sandy is here as well, and there's a picture of them in their happy place. And at Dennis's memorial, Ecclesiastes 3, for those of you who are learned in this way, is here. And maybe some of you came tonight and know it is Pete Seeger's song that was sung by the Birds, but it's the same thing. And so as we give grace, we're thinking about a microcosm of grace and our place in grace and our place in the universe and our place in imagery. And that there's always a time when things don't happen, a time when things do happen. And Ecclesiastes 3 also goes on to talk about our role in that and how the gift of our labors in that, however they may be, is some of the greatest things that we can get from those things when we give that. So it's just a beautiful thing to be able to see, and I think Dennis really exemplified that, and certainly Sandy too. Dennis is a greeter, somebody who always guided people through the children's garden to whatever it was in a very non-aggressive fashion. So every child who came in always found their unique grace, thanks to Dennis. So we've become a treasured jewel of this community, and some really cool things, like #1 on TripAdvisor. Right? So we've become this really popular treasure, and an amazing thing that just happened where we're maybe you saw Center County Favorites come, you can pick up your copy at Fireside Barbecue, I'm told, or Bonfire Barbecue, but we're the gold family attraction, the favorite place for families, and that's just such an amazing thing because it exemplifies our spirit of trying to be welcoming. So as we close out tonight and we think about, okay, well, what do you do now? What do you do for an encore? Or what do where does the future hold? We're in the process now of, of working on a master site plan and then a fountain garden renovation and complete re-envisioning. And what I can tell you is that it's going to stay very true to several different principles, one of them being the Ridge and Valley and the ecoregions of Pennsylvania, as exemplified here on the right, but then also things that are sustainable as part of our Sustainable Landscapes Implementation Plan, that will continue to do things as great stewards of the land and great holders of the land and great respect of the land. And we're going to honor a bunch of old friends, large and small, along the way. So Kim is here pictured with our outreach finance team with Millie Zhao, who's another one of the originals of the Arboretum over on the left. And we look at how we're good financial stewards in terms of everything that we do, as well as being a part of this. So in closing, I know I'm getting close to my time. So before I take questions, all of this just leads to our thesis point of grace keeps happening. We keep giving to it, and it keeps giving to us. And so you may walk away from here and say, so this is a wonderful story, and we can understand how we interact with the human beings around us, and that's an ecology. And how human beings have interacted with this land and how everything else has interacted to make this magic place. So what can I do? How can I be a part of this? Well, yes, go visit the Arboretum. That's #1. #2, you can choose to get involved, but if you're wondering about how to heal planet Earth, I leave you with Dr. Casey's 5 easy things you can do to help save planet Earth, and a lot of them are easy things. So plant new trees and keep the old, as the parable goes. One is silver and the other is gold. Golden oak, silver maple, we can play around with that. But we live under a constant threat of what we call invasive species. And it's an interesting dialogue because we consider them invasive. They don't consider themselves invasive. They just are taking advantage of everything that we're giving them. So I always say mitigate them, because you will never eliminate them. When you push the boulder uphill and you keep trying to just say, I'm going to eliminate, you lose sight of the goal, which is how do we coexist and have it happen where we do want it and have it happen where we don't want it. And then I always say, mind your plant meds, a lot of discussion about medications. The use of tools, chemical tools, is often needed, especially in a place like the pollinator and bird garden. We don't use insecticides and fungicides, but we certainly use things to try to mitigate invasive species wherever we have them. And then two more. One is make peace with the natives and attract them. And native plants are great, and we all focus on native plants, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a non-native plant. It's okay. It's okay. The blessing that we get when we grow things is fine. So sometimes we get a little too heavy into that, into horticulture. And then finally, just compost. It never goes out of style. So that's my talk today for you. I hope I've done a little bit to kind of further this conversation about ecology and grace along the journey. And thank you so much.
So we're going to have just a little bit of time for a few questions, and Pastor Scholl has the roving microphone like Jerry Springer. So if you have a question and you raise your hand, he's going to come around so you can do that. And while he is doing that, I just want to share with you one link that Grace has with the Arboretum, which is that we do FitLink. We host FitLink here, which is connected with LifeLink.
Oh,
so we do
awesome.
the cardio drumming, and you do the things out there at the Arboretum. So we really are a part of that big ecology of grace.
Yeah.
Guys, questions? Comments? Rich, all the way in the back.
Where are we with the restoration of the American chestnut?
Oh, I get asked that question a lot. So the American Chestnut Foundation has now done, I think it's either 10 or 11 back crosses, and even employed the use of genetic engineering to try to return the American chestnut in some way, shape, or form to us. And those crosses are crosses with Chinese chestnut and other Asian chestnut species. They came this close to releasing what they thought was a brand new American chestnut. And they're currently going back to work on that a little bit so that they can be absolutely positively sure that sometime, hopefully in the next probably 2 to 5 years, what they release is exactly what they want it to be. So the chestnut research plot still exists out there. It actually was featured in a PBS Vanishing Act episode recently, so you can go back and there's a really nice conversation about the chestnuts that features the person who then was in charge of the chestnut plot, Sarah Fitzsimmons. So that's where it is. That said, during our lifetime and during the next millennia, you'll never see chestnuts be the same way that they were 100 years ago, 150 years ago when they dominated the forest. And that's a really good way for us that when we look at these things and we look at these invasive species threats and we say, Dutch elm disease is going to wipe out everything, emerald ash borer is going to wipe out everything, nature finds a way, and it finds a way oftentimes without us. Yes, we could use a lot less spotted lanternfly in the world, I'm not going to deny that. Yeah, but thank you for the question.
I planted a few chestnut trees up on Route 144 north of Snowshoe about 20 years ago, and they're surviving.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing too, is after that wave goes through, and they even talk in this episode of Vanishing Act, a spoiler alert here, that there are still some really big survivor chestnuts, not many, and some of them are here in Pennsylvania. Yeah. Other questions? Did I stump the band? Am I in between now and dessert or other things? Wow. Oh, yeah, please. Don't be shy.
This is kind of a selfish question.
Yeah.
We just are in the process of moving back here to Center County, but we live in Ferguson Township, and I'm trying to find out what to do with all my yard trimmings. And you were mentioning composting, which I'm not allowed to do in my HOA community, and I wonder if there's any place, anywhere that anybody knows of where they have citizen drop-off of yard waste for composting?
So I know that Center County Recycling Authority a couple of summers ago had a pilot program for composting, and it was over near where G.I. Haubecker is. And so they may still have that. I know for grass clippings, they take them over at that site. And you can always run them down, or you can maybe talk with somebody who lives in Patton Township or something else about where to take those. So I understand. So that would be how you could definitely do it. There are also vermicompost systems, worm composting, that is a closed system itself, and so you are composting, but you're not out there exposed to the environment, so that's an option for food scraps too if you like worms, but some people don't, and that's okay too. But you know, we should really just worship all God's creatures, right? That's right. Except okay, yeah.
First, I just want to say that our family has had great times at the Arboretum, and we have wonderful memories and wonderful photographs, so thank you so much for that. And
Don't thank me, please. But,
well, I'm thanking
but every
you
time
for,
it never gets old to hear that, because we're so
But my
blessed.
question is, one thing that I've been fascinated with over the years going there, and I always like to go and see it, is I think you referred to it as the watershed sculpture.
Yeah, or the Valley and Ridge sculpture,
Yeah.
the Ridge and Valley sculpture.
How do you get the water turned on? So I could, like, I've never seen it with the water. You know, I of course can imagine it, but how do you do that?
So
Like, how is it done? And can you, like, go there for special tours that are doing that?
Currently, we cannot do that. So part of the grace that is the Ridge and Valley sculpture is you have to be there when it's raining. And that's what turns on the water. And that's the beautiful thing about the Arboretum, is that every day you go, you'll see something different. And you should want to go just as much when the weather's not great as when the weather's great.
So what I'm hearing is that we should do rain-based visits to the Arboretum.
Rain at the Arboretum is amazing. The color spectrum that comes out in the rain, and at the Palmer Museum too. The stone that's locally quarried that's on the sides of the museum just comes alive in the rain, and you see patterns and different things in the stone. That's amazing. So look for Donkey from Shrek, Angry Dog, and others. But
There we go.
are we more questions or time? Or are we about
So I think
out?
we're just about at our time, and
Okay,
Pastor
great.
Schul's going to lead us in a closing prayer in just a moment. First of all, let's give thanks for Casey's presence among us tonight.
Thank you so much.
We've been so blessed so far these 3 weeks to have really wonderful things to engage with and people who are here. And so you are right in that with us, and we're so very delighted that you were here with us. If you're interested in visiting the Arboretum, especially if you want to get the behind the scenes, Sandy Hall over here is the queen of the Arboretum, and she will be glad to give you the behind the scenes tour that I got. Next week, we'll have Dr. Charlie Vasey with us. He's a member of our own congregation, and he's going to be talking about sustainable biodiversity as a part of his work at Penn State. And so we'll put our different kind of thinking hats on for that. And he does his work. He's very honest that it is an expression of his faith. So we'll look forward to hearing how he is marrying his faith as a Lutheran and the work that he feels called to do at the university. And so, in the meantime, we're going to pray ourselves out. And friends who've been watching our live stream, stay with us for the prayer, and then we'll look forward to seeing you again next week.
Well, friends, if you're like me, you want to go to the Arboretum and just sit and watch. So I want to close with a very, very brief poem meditation from one of my heroes, Thomas Merton, and then about doing just that. And then close with a prayer from our All Creation Sings hymnal supplement. Merton writes, "What a thing it is to sit absolutely alone in the forest at night, cherished by this wonderful, unintelligible, perfectly innocent speech. The most comforting speech in the world, the talk that rain makes by itself, all over the ridges and the talk of the water courses everywhere in the hollows. Nobody started it. Nobody is going to stop it. It will talk as long as it wants, this rain, as long as it talks. I am going to listen. Let us pray. Mysterious God, whose imagination and desire embrace all, we seek to discern you in the interplay of forces, in the order and the chaos of the universe, and in the complexities of every living system. Give us grace to honor your goodness in what we know and in what we do not know, in the world's harmonies and turbulence, and in its promise and change. For you are in, through, and beyond all that is. One God, made known to us in Jesus Christ, through the Holy Spirit, our inspiration and guide. Amen.